Hello, everyone. Hello to this rainy evening. I hope you're all safe and in the comforts of your home. I am Penny Bongato. I am a life, success, and career coach, consultant, trainer, facilitator, educator, author, and director of POWERinU Training and Coaching Philippines. And I welcome you to our complimentary webinar, Allyship, Its Importance to Fight Institutional Gender Bias. We have a very interesting topic for tonight. But before we go to the topic proper, I'd like to introduce you briefly to POWERinU. So POWERinU is anchored in our faith and values. We collaborate to empower individuals and organizations to achieve sustainable results through value-adding consulting solutions. We take pride in our values of being customer-centric, change advocates, passionate learners, and entrepreneurial leaders. We are a consulting, training, and coaching company with established global partners, and we offer knowledge, expertise, and experience on a team of internationally certified high-caliber trainers, consultants, and coaches with experience in various industries across Asia Pacific. Just a little information for all of you. In our coaching services, we have more than 1,000 coaching hours, which we have rendered already to our clients in coaching. We also have served a plethora of clients in just 7 years. That is since 2016. And we have offered monthly complimentary webinars since 2019. And now it's 2023, which is our 5th year in offering these webinars. Now let's go to the exciting part. Let me introduce our speaker tonight. Okay, bear with me because her introduction, she has wealth of knowledge and experience. And I'd like to give a proper introduction to our speaker for tonight. She is the newest member or newest director of POWERinU, Ms. Thelma Meneses. She has more than 30 years local and multinational senior executive HR roles in fast-moving consumer group, pharmaceuticals, nutritionals, retail, real estate, hospitality and gaming, telecom, electrical utilities industries. She gained executive leadership experience from multinationals such as Coca-Cola, Eastman Kodak, Mead Johnson Nutritionals, Bristol Myers Squibb, Unilever, AstraZeneca, and from local conglomerates like Bixel Holding Company of the Gaisano Group, which has retail, banking, investment, and real estate. Also the Lopez Group, electrical utilities. Also the Soler Hotel and Gaming, Alphones, Star Specialist, Inc., and NutriAsia Incorporated. Thelma is also an executive coach, and she also creates blueprints and operationalizes the company's strategy and good governance, such as corporate governance for the board of directors, code of ethics, conduct, company policies and procedures, or behavioral standards at work. She also drives world-class HR infrastructures to attract, retain, and motivate talent for startup and mature organizations through training and OD, talent acquisition, career development and succession planning, performance management, rewards and recognition, labor and employee relations, and HR services. She's done it all. She's done it all. I'm so lucky to have her. Thelma also designs and drives high-performing culture strategy, including transformational change through diversity, equity, and inclusion, well-being, future of workplace, internal communications, labor relations, and employee relations. I am very proud to be working with Thelma, and everybody, let us all welcome our speaker for tonight, Ms. Thelma Meneses.
Hello, everyone. My goodness, Penny, you instead of getting elated, I feel so humbled with your introduction. So I'm so happy that I have been invited again to manage or to hold this webinar on a topic that is very, very close to my heart, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was actually my role in my last corporate job, where I really had to drive a global D&I agenda. And I'll share with you some of those things. Of course, given the limited time, I wanted to do more and share with you my insights, but let's focus first on what is DEI, what are those biases, and then maybe I can talk more about, how can we fight all of these biases, not only limited to gender, but all the marginalized groups within the target groups of people for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So let me share with you my slide presentation, which that the picture in front is not about makibaka or something, let's create a revolution. To a certain extent, it's a revolution of changing the mindset, a revolution of how can we, as an individual or as leaders, drive peace and harmony, because this is really what we want. It's a Miss Universe answer, right? On what do we really want to do. Well, because human beings are at the center of the universe, and everyone aspires to really have a peaceful and harmonious life. And what can we do better than create this or amplify this importance of human rights, this importance of addressing diversity through our ways of working and through our own systems and beliefs. So let me start with, oops, okay. I won't show this anymore because Penny has done a great job in telling you all about myself. So I just want you to focus on later on my email, should you want to consider talking about this further. Okay. So what is diversity, equity, and inclusion? They are totally different. You may be diverse, an organization may be diverse, but are they demonstrating inclusion? Not necessarily. So diversity is really about the representation or the makeup of an entity. Okay, it can be, about race, and I'm gonna talk about that later on. It can be a gender, it can be age. Who are this representation or makeup of an entity. Inclusion is about how well we allow these diverse groups, to contribute, make their themselves present, and their perspectives are valued and integrated into where they work, whether it is in the family, the community, or the environment, or the organization where they work with. So you may have diverse groups around PWD, LGBT, and gender, and all that, but are you practicing inclusion? Are their voices heard? So it may not necessarily be the same, right? So a diverse and inclusive workplace is one that makes everyone, regardless of who they are or what they do for the business, feel equally involved in and supported in all areas of the workplace. So note that the all areas part is important. Now, equity is different from equality. When we now drive a culture of equity, it means that everyone is provided with equal level playing field to gain access to resource and provide them with what they need to succeed. As an example, for women, if you want to put equity with women workers in the plant, have they been given proper education compared to those who have been to other genders who do not have who have already those education, and yet, as you know, women sometimes they don't have education around um, even the work that is normally given to men. So do you provide them that equal level playing field around education? Do you provide them about around policies and procedures, especially that they are giving birth? So for birth, for caring the family, for breastfeeding and all that. How is that policy and procedure created in the organization that allows them to have equal level playing field when it comes to being promoted? Because I'm sure some companies would say, well, I'm not going to give her perform a high performance rating simply because she was out on maternity leave. Can you believe that? Right? Out on maternity leave. And so she only spent 6 months in the company. So I'm not gonna give her any high performance rating. I personally really do a call out for such managers who think that way, because that's not an equal level playing field. How can you discriminate people simply because they gave birth, right? So it's not equality where everyone is treated the same way. That's not what we're trying to address. So diversity, equity, and inclusion is different. And so an organization or a community or the workplace should not just adopt diversity, but should also look at equity and inclusion. Okay. And as I've said earlier, who are this marginalized group? So in a social context that started when we were looking at human rights and so forth and so on. And then we said that there are a group of individuals who are outside a dominant group, okay, in a society, community, or workplace. It can be the race, the color, or ethnicity, which is very predominant or rampant, prevalent in North America. That's why they have the biggest issue on marginalized group is the color, black and white. It can also be age. We're talking about discrimination around the baby boomers versus the millennials versus the Gen X and all that. I appreciate the differences because of the label, but once there is already discrimination, how can we make sure that their voices are heard? How can we make sure that we do not discriminate people with age, especially those elderly people, right? Gender, of course, women and male and others. Religion as well. I experienced when I was in in Nepal, to be specific, where their focus is that most of their employees should be Muslims, and so there it's the reverse here in the Philippines, where we look at Roman Catholics versus what do we do with the others. And so even in our practice in the workplace, we offer a First Friday Mass for Roman Catholics, but what about for the Muslims and all that? So I'm glad that even the country has already been celebrating different religious celebrations from different uh, beliefs and ideology. So LGBT as well, just very, very important to recognize them and give them an equal level playing field. There are still a lot of people who are homophobic, and so how can we drive that? Language is also very important. There's language discrimination. Uh, and Filipinos are very, very discriminatory when it comes to people who speak good English are intelligent, and people who do not know to speak English are not so intelligent. And that's just one example. So it doesn't happen only in North America. I think in Philippines, we have the highest, in my view, the highest discrimination in even with PWD. We do name calling. And so that's important that we start understanding that there is unconscious bias that is prevalent in our culture. Okay. So why is it important? Number one, it's the law. There is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that addresses the rights and benefits of of human beings, which include access to education, employment, fair pay, voting rights or suffrage, healthcare, and more. The values of free speech, privacy, and mutual respect, irrespective of gender, race, ethnicity, or religion. So there's a long list, and you can Google, you can research what is that Declaration of Human Rights, either from the International Labor Organization or more especially under the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. And then, of course, aside from it is the law not to discriminate, from a business perspective, there is a study, I think this is from Towers Watson a long time ago, that to measure the organizational effectiveness of a company, look at the human capital index, and those who are embracing or those who have a strong DE&I agenda have a high human capital index that is directly influencing the business results, because people are you have a stronger talent acquisition, retention, and motivation, resulting, of course, to highly engaged employees who truly believe the organization, transforming and creating a high performing culture. So it makes sense, from a money business perspective. It also makes sense from a social context that human rights, human beings have equal rights and benefits to have access. And of course, the word there is respect. Okay? So let's talk about the biggest barrier. Okay? Why can't we have? We have talked about D&I, and most companies have already been into it. In fact, one question that I got from an executive is, Thelma, in India, we have been doing this in our company for the last 30 years, 20 years, but still, we're not even having an increase in women agenda because they continuously leave the organization because of family, because of child rearing, breastfeeding, and all that. And to me, it's like, well, that's how it is because they made their choice. What's important is we create a policy or we create a culture that recognizes this marginalized group. And so if they choose to be at home and do more of child rearing, that's their choice. What's not good is if they don't have a choice, simply because the company does not allow them to have choices, right? So the biggest barrier to having a strong D&I agenda is the cumulative impact of interpersonal, cultural, systems of beliefs and philosophies within the society that creates the norm and systemic practices that is difficult to break. In short, the biggest barrier to a strong D&I agenda is our conscious or unconscious bias. Okay? And I'll talk more about that later on. Okay, so here's the thing. There are interpersonal biases, which means that individuals interact with others based on their personal, racial, and biased beliefs, misinformation, or stereotypes that adversely affect their interpersonal relationship. Maybe not so long ago with our parents, their parents or our grandfathers or grandmothers would say, don't for women, don't study anymore because you'll just be a housewife anyway. So if I have limited resources, I'll give the fund to the boys because they will be the breadwinner of the family. That's a bias. That is already an embedded cultural bias in us. Okay, or I don't want to have women in the plant, in the shop floor, simply because they don't have the energy to carry all of those heavy loads and blah blah blah. Okay, believe it or not, in my past experience in Bangladesh, 40% of the truck drivers in Bangladesh are women. And it's just a matter of how the company can support women. And one good example that I was truly impressed about is that they took away the bias of maternity leave so that when the woman comes to the office after maybe 100 days of maternity leave, the woman has an assistant for the next 3 months because they know that the body of the woman who reports for work is not yet as strong as compared to before. And so carrying those heavy loads in the next 3 months is the kind of support. And that's an example of how companies can address, not disadvantage, but the unique makeup of a particular gender in order for them to work productively. So there are still biases, even religions, even the caste systems here in the Philippines. There's still bias around, oh, I don't want to work with the Chinese people because they are this. I don't want to work with Indian people because they are this. I don't want to work with, a particular group of ethnicity or Muslims or Catholics or Iglesia ni Cristo. We have a lot of those, and those were created because of our personal and biased beliefs and how we grow up. Okay. On the other side of the spectrum is the institutional bias. There's discrimination and bias that occurs through policies, procedures, and practices. And as HR professionals, we may even be guilty of such, right? Because we say, well, for talent acquisition, we just want talent who are in the upper middle class up to the upper class. Okay, simply because we're looking at high-end products, and they need to be exposed to all of this social requirements. Okay, we're selling high-end bags or shoes or something. I saw that. I experienced that in one of the companies I work with, where their talent acquisition is focused on those who graduated from private schools and who had experience traveling and all that. That's bias, right? And or we want to have leaders who are clone of the existing leaders. I want leaders to have this kind of, because the leaders are saying that, hey, I am here because I am successful, because I am who I am. And therefore, I want people who think and act like me. Okay, so marginalized groups like PWD are not even given the opportunity to work, right? So even our policies and procedures and practices, okay, intentional or not, that puts marginalized groups at a disadvantage is an institutional bias. So we have to reflect on that, right? So if you take a look now at the interpersonal and institutional biases, there are such things as implicit and unconscious, tendency to make judgments based on prejudice and assumptions rather than indisputable facts and data, explicit and conscious, aware of one's prejudice, so you know that you have this prejudice, and attitudes towards certain groups like homophobic. Oh, I don't want to work with gays because this is what I don't believe in. I only believe in male and female. But that's your opinion. Keep it to your keep it to your own opinion. But translating that to company policies and procedures, then you know that it's explicit. You're conscious about it, and yet you still do it. So there's a positive or negative preferences for a particular group. Okay. Organizational bias is now you're talking about stereotyping on hiring decisions, personality typing, and so forth and so on. And I'd like you to have some questions on this one while I'm moving towards the other slides, because I want you to reflect. I want you to think. I want to challenge the way you think, because this is not new. I mean, it's important that we also understand whether or not we are ourselves um, being biased, whether it's conscious or unconscious. So the institutional bias, most of you are working and driving a culture. You can find it especially in the practices in HR, either in the reward and recognition. And that's why even in the US, what they do is they do an audit. given the names, given the age, the years of experience, the qualification, and then all that. How is it different why men are paid higher than women? And believe me, it's happening, right? So maybe here in the Philippines, we haven't done a lot, but I've seen some organizations who have conducted audits on this, and it shows that the increases are that there's a significant difference overall in terms of how much is the salary of a male versus a female, given that they are all equal in some aspects. Okay. Promotion, hiring, career, performance management. Oh, you should stay here and spend most of the time because you're single anyway, because your colleague is a parent and has two kids, and therefore he can leave at 5 o'clock, and you need to stay longer because you're single anyway, right? So that's discrimination. Training and development, comp and benefits. So what it does is it sub-optimizes the talent potential. Of course, people are no longer naive, and so it can be a labor issue. It can be a discrimination issue. Of course, demotivated. How can you be highly proud and endorse your company to be to your friends that this is a good employer of choice when you know that there is rampant bias and discrimination? Of course, if you're not really that highly motivated, you just give what is required of you, but there's nothing that you move beyond discretionary effort. You don't go beyond it simply because, well, we're not really that engaged. So there's low productivity. And of course, if you're going to have a lot of clones simply because you're stereotyping and all that, pardon my French, there's intellectual incest. You don't have any more diversified thinking. Okay, so there's a group think. Everybody thinks alike. So of course, you know what it means when that happens in an organization. So how do you address it? 5 things. You educate people, you empathize with this marginalized group. One is very difficult. Ask the uncomfortable question. Communicate, and of course, act. All right. So diversity, equity, and inclusion, in my view, and you can use this as a straw man, okay? I define it as, an organization that is considered an employer of choice, a great place to work, where this organization bring together a diverse bunch of people, where everyone is doing their bit. That's the equity and inclusion, and where business is a force for good. Because when people see this, and then of course from an HR perspective, you can do it from talent acquisition, start with hiring, diverse, very purposive, diverse talent. Training and development is also very important in terms of what does that look like? How can we train ourselves and our people to agree to disagree, to change their paradigm, that there are diverse opinions and views, and that those diverse opinions and views drive innovation, okay? Where everyone is doing their bit. So how can we create that the voices of this marginalized group are heard, are considered, okay? So we can drive that through internal communication, moving from awareness, learning, practicing, and mastery, where we all know what it's like to be an ally, which is the key of my my discussion tonight. And then of course, developing communities and network, so that allyship is not just about the concept of championing the cause of this marginalized group, but also developing communities, okay? And then of course, the employee engagement. How do you measure success? How do you reward and recognize? And most importantly, as I've said earlier, allyship, business, of course, executive sponsorships is very, very important. You cannot do this alone. It's a culture thing. It's a purposive leadership agenda that if you want to have a stronger D&I strategy in the workplace. All right. So what is D&I, or what is allyship, rather? It is a holistic social justice action plan that brings our one's purpose to life by, I mentioned earlier, by listening, by educating, advocating, speaking up, and taking action. So what the pictures here, I purposely put it in there to represent the listening, educating, advocating, speaking up, and taking action. Okay. In order for you to be an ally, you need to have a strong character with the right compass to know what is right and honorable thing to do. It's really about your character. Okay. We talked about that in our previous POWERinU webinar, where character matters. Okay. And then, of course, while your character is very strong, it's important to have a huge amount of courage and resolve to stand up against discrimination. I remember when I was in India, and so they were so proud presenting to me that, oh, Miss Thelma, we have in our plant, we have identified women diversity. And so we're targeting 40% of our plant workers are women. Okay, so I was very happy. I went there and congratulated everyone. And then they said, can you come down and see how we recognize people? So they were calling each one. Also, let's recognize for the best yield. It's a manufacturing plant. The best yield goes to Mohammed something something. And then the one who has the highest productivity ratio is female diversity, something like that. So I said in public, why do you call each woman female diversity? Why can't you call them by name? You know, so you have to be quick in calling it out. Similar, same location. We were in meetings, and then the general manager of that plant was saying, oh, so we have this management trainee. So finally, women have questions now. And so I said, that's bias. That's discrimination. Stop it. Right? So you need to have that kind of courage and stand up, because I know that it was politically suicide for me to even do that to a GM. But once you know your true north and you stand up for what is right, I mean, you can't go wrong. Okay? Rather than choosing to walk away and not engage. It's like, oh, this guy is really something else. He's discriminating, but I'd rather not be part of it. Then you are also part of that institutional bias that's very difficult to break. Learn how to stand up against discrimination. Okay? Call it out. So why allies are necessary? Anyone has the potential to be an ally. They recognize that though they are not a member of the underinvested and oppressed communities they support, they make a concerted effort to better understand the struggle every single day. As an example, I created executive men allies to support women. They may not know the challenges of women, but because they are allies, then they create policies, they create charters, they influence the bigger group not to have those discriminatory work around women. Okay, because an ally might have more privilege and recognizes said privilege. They are powerful voices. So it's also important that these allies can have a stronger influence on the majority of the community or the organization. Okay. How can one be an ally? Take on the struggle as if it's your own. Transfer the benefits of your privilege to those who lack it. Amplify the voices of the oppressed before your own. Acknowledge that even though you feel pain, the conversation is not about you. Stand up, even when you feel scared. And of course, we're human beings, we can make mistakes. But let's decenter ourselves from those mistakes, recognize them, and move forward. Okay? The do's and don'ts of being an ally: be open to listening, be aware of your implicit biases, because we all have our implicit biases. Research to learn more about the history of the struggle in which you are participating, whether it is PWD, LGBT, gender, age, religion, and so forth and so on, culture, language. Do the inner work to figure out a way to acknowledge how you participate in oppressive systems. Okay. Do the other work and figure out how to change the oppressive systems. Okay. Sorry for the language, sometimes even regional. Oh, there is this Luzon thing. They call it the Manila regime or something, that most of the local companies look up to Luzon-based companies as probably more superior. And that's not true. The people who are based in the Visayas, like Aboitiz, Metro Gaisano, are probably the same or even better than those companies who are working in the Imperial Manila, right? So it's important that we figure out how do we make sure that even in the choices of the companies, or even in the choices of regional perspective here in the Philippines, we do not have biases. So amplify all of those suppressed voices, allow yourself to be the voice, and learn how to listen and accept criticism with grace. That's one thing that I really like about being an ally. You do not fight. The feminism movement, where they they fight, they become so confrontational, because they are fighting for what the feminism is, and I'm not a big fan of that. That creates more divide, right? So rather than fight, educate people, allow them to realize why is it important to them as well, rather than say you're wrong and you're judging them from having these systems and beliefs that you think are biases. So do the work every day to learn how to be a better ally. The don'ts, you can read that. Do not expect to be taught or shown. Take it upon yourself to use the tools around you to learn and answer your questions. Do not participate for the gold medal in the oppression Olympics. So it's like, you're the martyr, and so you're just as bad as the marginalized person. And do not behave as though you know best. It offends the sensibilities of people when you're starting to preach like, you know it all. Even in some of and I noticed that in some evangelization, sorry for this, when people are evangelizing and they think that, uh, they're holier than thou. Okay, I'm not talking about a particular religion. It's really more on you turn off a lot of people when you show that you know more than others, or you're holier than the others. So do not behave as though you know best. Do not take credit for the labor of those who are marginalized before you step into the picture. And do not assume that every member of an underinvested community feels oppressed. So if you want to know more, I put in here the Heart Shift Collective by Amélie Lamont. There's a lot of articles in the internet that she wrote, and these are one of those. So just continue the awareness, the learning, until you become it becomes you. It becomes who you are in terms of your true north, in terms of your principle centered leadership. Okay, so what critical changes, if we want to go back to our workplace, what critical changes need to happen to solidify and strengthen our diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda? This particular slide is is leaning towards, organization, not necessarily, your personal uh, journey. But you can also reflect on how you can do your personal journey through this. How do you lead? How do we work? How do we learn? And what are those key enablers that we can do in order for us to strengthen and solidify our DE&I agenda? So, a self, team, or community, we should be role models. So, it's a paradigm shift. It's a lot of self-reflection and assessment. How we work. So, allow people to be empowered and energized to work together as a society or as a community or as employees that respects diverse opinion. I mentioned that earlier, right? Because diversity of opinions and views allow us to drive innovation and creativity. And of course, because we respect, we move towards a common purpose and vision of a peaceful and harmonious society. So, rewiring. How do we do the interpersonal relationship? It's again a reflection and assessment, and how can we practice more on our interpersonal relationship? We need to rewire it, embracing different ways of collaboration and sharing knowledge. How do we learn? We ourselves become a learning vessel based on our ability to reinvent ourselves. Okay, it's not enough that, oh, I've learned this 20 years ago, so this is what I know, and this is how I'm going to do it. Maybe, life is a journey. Until you get to the end where you're now in the cemetery, you continuously evolve. You continuously learn. So make sure that the cutting edge, the people-centric characteristics you learn, I use the word transversal. Transversal is crossing different lines. So if you have two lines here, transversal capability is cutting across those diverse lines. So visually, if you have this particular systems, philosophies, and belief on one particular aspect, and then there's another one, you cut it across and make sure that you appreciate this. Okay? Individual and group mentoring. So it's very important to have a mentor, someone who can mirror you and tell you where you are, okay, against your vision of becoming an ally. Team workshop, toolkits, and practices. Okay? So it's very important that you do this with other people. You hear feedback, but at the same time, really the ultimate intention to cultivate. Okay? So in the organization that I work with, we use storytelling and communication to influence people, create that level of awareness. So we measure how we listen to them. We drive allyship in terms of creating different allies. We develop communities, communities of LGBTs, communities of women, communities of PWDs, and then all that. And then, of course, we celebrate every month because there's the Pride Month, there is the Women Month, there is the PWDs and all that. Those months on an annual basis, we celebrate those. Okay? So that's very important in order for us to continuously drum it up. And then one tip that I can share with you is look at the 4 areas when you're creating a team of allies. Leadership, okay? So look at the ecosystem of the entire DNI. Who are this? How do you create the framework? What's the charter? What do you want to do when you're developing a DNI ally? Okay, what is the success measure? What does success look like for this allyship team? And is it possible that this team report to CEO because the CEO is the most influential leader in the group, and so you need business executive sponsorship. And then coordinate. What does the structure look like? What's the overall scope? What are the roles and responsibilities of each member of the allyship team? Develop clear roadmaps. Where do you want to go? What are the action plans in the next 3 months? Don't wait for 1 year or 3 years. Just do it one at a time. Something that is uh, tangible, something that is digestible. Okay, develop individual and team allyship, leadership competencies, because it takes a different skill set in order for you to have that kind of competency to be an ally. And of course, communicate. And then from an HR perspective, manage the change, lead the change, handhold the organization in driving that D&I agenda. So, put it another way, you can use the adoption rate on allyship, where identify the early adopters and the early majority to bring that to the 100% aspired adoption rate of that maturity model. On the other hand, on the other side of the spectrum, identify who are those late majority. And you know what? I've learned this the hard way, even when I was in my maybe even 10, 15 years ago, that you do not spend so much time on those 20% that are laggards and that are not anymore willing to change. Spend your time on the 80% of the people who are still on the who are still fence sitters, and then leverage on those who are already catalysts and are already advocating fiercely the programs that you have. For those who are non-conformants, don't put too much energy there. In fact, if they are so difficult, as an example, sexual discrimination, there's a law there, or gender discrimination, there's law in that. In the US, even language discrimination from the South versus the East Coast. And I remember I had that issue when I was HR for North America. Someone from Atlanta filed a case against the leader, because in Atlanta they pronounce the asterisk as asterix. Okay, and the leader put a red circle on the communication of this Southern girl and said, you should use asterisk. So she went to me and said, I have a language discrimination because in Atlanta we call it asterix, and here in the East Coast they call it asterisk. So that simple is already a language discrimination. So I also experienced that, because Filipinos have this English where it's very Filipino sounding. So I mentioned something like the hiring of this person is non-negotiable. Is non-negotiable. You cannot negotiate because the person has a lot of DUI, blah, blah, blah. And then this executive said, what did you say? I said, negotiate. Oh, maybe you mean negotiate. I filed a case against that person, and that person was terminated because that's language discrimination when you are when it was done in a malicious way. Okay, so even language discrimination is something that is, it creates a lot of biases. So don't spend too much time on that. Maybe find a best fit outside the organization, but spend more on the early adopters and early majority, and maybe a little bit on the late majority by providing education. Okay, I wish I have more questions, and maybe Penny can help me with the questions. So be an ally today. Do, make, recognize, read, do, and watch, and create. Do this even though you cannot fully understand these groups, this marginalized group. Make a concerted effort to understand. Recognize that you have more privileged and powerful voices alongside this marginalized group. Read and watch allyship related articles, and create or be a member of a network of allies. So this ends my presentation, and I hope you have more questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thelma. I learned a lot from your presentation.
Thank you.
Language discrimination. I didn't even know that there is such a thing. Well, now I learned so much. Create allies, have sponsors. The unconscious bias really hit me because we do have unconscious bias without us knowing it, without us being, when somebody calls our attention, then we realize, oh yeah, we have unconscious bias. You mentioned also about Pride Month, Women's Month, PWD Month. Now
Mhm.
the men are asking, what about Men's Month?
You
Paano
know,
kami? What about us?
that's the most unfortunate thing. I heard that from an American guy, and I also heard that from a South African guy. You know, a white American is the one that is not protected in the US. You know, everyone is protected from uh, the veterans and the women and age and gender and all that, except for white male Caucasians. Okay. And maybe because it was coming from, they are the majority. So that's my answer to that question. Maybe they belong to the majority and therefore they have all of this. Remember when I said, who are this marginalized group? They don't belong to the elite group. So I think we still consider the male as belonging to the elite majority group. And that's why, unless, you know, here in the Philippines, the husbands are maybe they need to create something to protect themselves also from their housewives, from their wives.
That's
I don't
something
know.
for us to discuss in a separate
Yes, we can reflect on that one. Are they in this stage where they are now the marginalized group and the wives are the ones who are? I don't know.
Oh, Alma, we have a very interesting question in the chat box. I'll read it to you. Thank you, Dimitri, for
Hi,
asking this question.
Dimitri.
Oh, what's a good way to call out someone without committing political suicide? We know in our heart what is the right thing to do, but when confronted with a real situation, fear takes over. How
Mhm.
do we overcome it?
I mean, you know, to me, it's really all about empathy. Okay. We can influence or we can ask questions more on a nice way. As an example, oh, that was wrong. Or maybe, you know, just calling the person out and humiliating. I was just probably exaggerating at the time because I had the license to do that. But you know, you're with peers, you're in a meeting and all that. So maybe one way is, do you really think you have to say that? That's discrimination. You know, it's the way you talk, it's the way you communicate without necessarily per, allowing the person to have a to feel it as a personal attack. Maybe you can say you probably are not aware of it, but you just mentioned something that is discriminatory. You know, can you say it again in a different way? Or very straightforward, without really sugarcoating. I take offense when you said that. Maybe you didn't mean it, but I really take offense when you said that, you know, the PWDs do not think the way we think. So, something like that.
Okay. I
Thank
hope
you, Thelma.
Dimitri,
Thank you. Yeah,
Is
okay.
that
thank
okay,
you so much.
Dimitri? Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much, Thelma. Thank you. Very useful.
Okay.
Alma, I have a question though.
Yes, go ahead.
You know,
Sunny.
I came from the BPO, right? So extensive years of experience in the BPO.
Yeah.
What if it's your client who discriminates?
Um, the experience I've had is on the, not the BPO, but the consumer service group. You know, the inbound and outbound calls. that client say. And some employees they can call them out. It's like, well, again, it's part of the company's policies that, hey, I'm not going to terminate you by calling out this client and you lost this client. It's again the culture of the organization, how supportive is the entire organization when you call out these biases. So I'll give you the name, back in Mead Johnson, uh, you cannot terminate an employee who called out a discriminatory comment coming from even the customers. I also remember that in AstraZeneca, where there were biases coming from doctors, and the medical reps would report that they had to leave the meeting with this particular doctor because of the biases on LGBT. And so the
Mhm.
doctor will come to us and complain that, hey, your med rep did this, and I'm very unhappy. So you have to choose. I provide, and I reply to them and say, we investigated. Thank you so much. But unfortunately, based on the evidences at hand, he was right. He was doing his job as a professional with ethical practices, and so we cannot terminate him. I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry, doctor. Just because some doctors would demand the organization to fire or terminate these individuals because they walked out. So it's a company. It's the company. So you have to provide that psychological safety, if you will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Mm.
Another issue that I had in the past, and I hope the audience will allow me to ask this question. It was a client who did not like LGBTs
Yes.
because they're very strict in terms of their religion, very strict. And when they saw the guys in the men's room putting lipstick and so on, and it's there in their account,
Mm.
and it's a big account.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do? And they complain.
Mm-hmm. True. I have that experience before in a local organization where the owners do not want to hire LGBTs. And so instead of calling them out and say you're wrong, because after all, they're the owners and I'm just an employee, right? So I have to show them facts that, hey, look, if you're looking for merchandising, creativity, innovation, don't you think these gays have an opportunity to be creative and to be innovative? So why can't we leverage on their particular skills and all that? And so the owner realized that, oh, you're right. So it was not calling out, but providing them data, providing them facts that, hey, it's not about discrimination, but giving them the chance because of meritocracy. So sometimes you can change
Mhm.
the way you influence them, instead of saying, oh, this is discrimination on gender, but you focus on the right principle of, is it meritocracy, is it merit is it now a practice of meritocracy? So they now realize, oh, it's not a personal attack, but they're that they realize that, oh yeah, but then we can open. So I'm happy to see that they have hired so many LGBTs, and they see the quality of work that these LGBTs are doing in their business.
Yes, in fact, I totally agree with you that perhaps when we can present the metrics of
Yes,
these people, they're people as well, right? And if
absolutely.
they have provide good metrics, then why the discrimination?
Yeah, true. Agree.
Oh, that's a very good advice. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Penny.
Okay, we have another question from Reggie from the chat
Okay.
box. Reggie, would you like to unmute yourself?
Okay.
Hi. Okay.
Hi, Reggie.
I'm really into this D&I, but I feel like it's really not a very black and white
Mm,
topic. And I come to a point in my life that, oh, I want to be equal to my teammates, to my subordinates. Then if I apply certain rule, it has to be applied across. And
Yeah.
then after a while, I come across this equity that which says that, depending on the situation of your teammate, you have to have, different ways in dealing with them. So my dilemma now is like, there are like really real situations where, for example, a teammate would need to be working from home all the time. Let's say, for example, somebody just maybe came from a maternity leave or something like that, which is a usual case. And then we have this rule that, you at least we work on a hybrid model where you have to work in the office on certain days, let's say three
Mhm.
times a week. So then it also somehow, for me, think that it's like now a bias to other people. Like I'm actually giving advantage to someone because of the special need, and it's not somewhat equal to other people now. So is there like a
Yeah.
guideline, or how do you, what are your thoughts about that? How do you actually manage those kind of situations?
Yeah. First and foremost, Reggie, uh, let's differentiate equity from equality. Okay. Equality means that everyone should have the same benefits, should be treated the same and all that. And that's Marxism in my view, okay, where everyone is equal. That's communism. I'm not even saying that they're bad, okay? That's just an ideology of being equal across. And that's, in my view, pardon me, it's just my personal view, that's utopia. You don't, you cannot create everything is even, everything is equal, but you can provide equity. Okay, so first is, do you have a diverse organization? So ask yourself, are you open to different marginalized groups and allow this diverse group to thrive and be the best version of themselves? So you have to assess yourself. That's one. Now, when you're doing some policies or programs or benefits, especially now that there are emerging personas as a function of the global pandemic, and so you now have this hybrid work from home or work from office and all that. That is a different paradigm shift in terms of, how do you provide that level of playing field for those who cannot work because of fear, right? So they work from home, especially that we're now looking at well-being. So there's mental wellness, there's health, and in all that. So again, this is not a privilege to a few. So that's a paradigm shift. This is not a privilege to a few, but another challenge for a leader like you to say, how can I make sure that I provide opportunities for people to still deliver? So that's a paradigm shift, even if they are in different personas, whether they are working from home, working from the office, or hybrid. Because at the end of the day, even our performance management is no longer, and that's a trend in HR, which is totally different from my topic, is no longer about the traditional performance management or the traditional arrangement where you need to start working from 8 to 5, regardless, right? The work now is leaning towards, I'm not talking about time and attendance. I'm not talking about this, but how do you collaborate? How do you network? And how do you deliver the results? Because the pandemic can come back again in a different shape or form, right? So we need to start a paradigm shift. So I hope, Reggie, I answered your question.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Reggie.
It's yeah, it's complicated, but I think
Yeah, we are all learning.
it's
Yes.
it's a it's a matter of a constant communication, and yeah, with
Yeah.
your team in order to
Yes.
come to
Yeah.
to an
Agree.
agreeable arrangement for everybody. Yeah. Thanks.
Agreeable, but your business is at the forefront. So you don't have to agree to all if you think that working from home will not make it, right?
Mm.
It's not an
Yeah.
accommodation thing. It's about being fair and just. So if you think that this person can do the job while at home, as an example, a technician in the shop floor, there's no way that this person can work from home. He needs to go to the manufacturing plant. And if it doesn't like it, then the right and honorable thing to do is find a best fit. Would you like to do something else rather than be a technician? Because technician needs to be in the workplace. It cannot be a hybrid. It cannot be this. So if that is very clear, then give this person an opportunity to find a better fit. But if she doesn't have the skill and he still says that, no, I don't want to do maybe inventory planning and all that, simply because he doesn't have the skill, then sorry to say, he's not fit. And so there are consequences around not being fit in the role.
Yep,
Short of
thank you.
saying, then find the best fit outside the company, because we've given you every opportunity. We looked for another job for you, but you're not open. So being fair is there, but you don't want to move, and therefore that's your choice.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay.
So thank you, Reggie, and thank you for allowing me to call you out and ask your question and unmute yourself. So thank you very much for being brave. So thank you, Reggie, for the
Thank
question.
you,
Thank you.
Dimitri and Reggie.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Thelma, for the very enlightening session on allyship.
Thank you
I
so
don't
much.
know. I only knew DEI, but the things that you mentioned to us today, I learned a lot from you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I can do more. So if you have other questions, please feel free to go back to POWERinU, and we can have more conversations around this. Personally, I'm an advocate of D&I. So this is not a job for me. This is really more my vocation. Thank you, Penny. And
Okay,
thank you for to POWERinU.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we'd like just to send some reminders. Thank you for attending our session today on allyship. And thank you, Thelma, for enlightening us about allyship and a lot of things about what we can do to get a good environment and not discriminate and have equity and inclusion. So last few announcements. So don't miss out. So subscribe at powerinU.com.ph to get dates on events, webinars, and free resources from POWERinU and its partners. Lastly, everyone can access the recording of this webinar through POWERinU's website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. Everyone who registered in this webinar will automatically get an invite to POWERinU's next complimentary webinar on September 5. And it's so exciting. Once again, our next webinar will be building successful startup strategies and secrets from a seasoned entrepreneur who is here in the audience and ask the first question, Dimitri.
Hello.
Yay.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Dimitri.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for this opportunity and the talk. Yeah, thank you.
So let's all join accomplished entrepreneur Dimitri. I hope that I get this right. Kuchnirenko. Right, Dimitri?
Perfect.
Okay. I practiced that. He's known for his track record of building multi-million-dollar businesses, as he reveals the secret behind building a successful startup. Dimitri will share invaluable insights on critical strategies that lead to startup success, along with the major mistakes to avoid. We don't want to make mistakes, so we better listen to Dimitri. Learn from his firsthand experiences and gain a deeper understanding of the key factors that contribute to a sustainable growth and profitability from company inception to scaling and selling. Whether you're just starting out or already on your entrepreneurial journey, this webinar with Dimitri will provide you with the insider knowledge and secrets that can make a significant difference in your startup's trajectory. This is the opportunity to gain a unique perspective from Dimitri and set yourself on the path of building a successful startup. Also, we want to invite you to our online public workshop, Powerful Storytelling, this month, and Leading Others, scheduled in August and October. Don't forget to register for at least 2 sessions from any of our online public workshop to entitle you to a discount. Now, before we officially close, we would like to request 10 seconds of your time to answer this quick poll so we can get your feedback. Your feedback is very important for us. We always say feedback is the breakfast of champions. So you can scan the QR code on the screen and click the link we sent in the chat. Your responses will help us further improve. So thank you in advance for your feedback. So I'll give you a few seconds. Please answer the poll. So once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us. Thank you for joining us. And we hope to see you again with Dimitri during our learning session on September 5. Good evening, everyone, and have a pleasant dinner. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you.